This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic. What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is April 13th, 2023. Jonathan Osborne here. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Luke Sylvia. Luke, what is up?
First episode in 50 episodes, or 49 probably, that there's no games that we're going to be recapping, Jonathan. Reading through the agenda tonight, there was no...
I wouldn't necessarily say that, because we are going to mention one game. That is the Bulls getting schmacked right now, down 11 to the Raptors.
That number's dwindling though, since we saw it last.
Yeah, a little bit.
We'll see how it is once we get to the end of the episode. I'm sure we'll check again. But yeah, it's weird not to have any games that we're really going to talk about Magic related. But we do have a fun conversation for this episode that you guys have read the title. You know, Uncle Jeff Turner.
Uncle Jeff.
Joined us for, I believe, the third time now. So really entertaining conversation. I'm happy you guys are going to be able to listen to that one. It was a lot of fun.
Some Penny Hardaway stories. Don't want to bury the lead here. Penny Hardaway stories at the end. A lot of fun. Obviously, we talked about the Magic season. Just kind of the way that it went beginning to end, what needs to go right heading into next season. Really fun conversation with Uncle Jeff. Favorite foods? You know we like to talk about food. We got into the good eats around the league with Uncle Jeff. Really, really fun conversation.
Yeah.
Don't forget, folks, coming up on May 16th, we're just about a month away now. It's a Tuesday night, the night of the NBA Draft Lottery. We are having our, I don't want to call it annual because hopefully we don't have to do it again for quite a while after this year, but we're having another draft lottery watch party, May 16th. That is a Tuesday night. Make sure that you clear your schedule, clear your calendar. We feel like we're circling in on a venue, and if everything goes right, I don't want to give anything away, but this is going to be pretty big. So we're looking forward to that. If you want to RSVP just to help give us an idea of how many people are going to be there, if you haven't RSVP'd already, go ahead and pause this episode really quickly. If you're listening on your phone or in the car, well, first of all, pull over if you're driving. We don't want you doing anything crazy on the road. But in this podcast episode description, there's going to be an RSVP link for the Draft Lottery Watch Party. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll find that in the description as well. So go ahead. And if you're on YouTube, by the way, go ahead, like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, all that good stuff so that you're notified every time that we post a new episode. Again, that is going to be May 16th. It is a Tuesday night. Just go ahead and clear your schedule now. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, Luke, that we are heading into the offseason, for our listeners who are maybe new to the show or weren't listening or watching last offseason, we're going to continue with the episodes coming every Monday, every Thursday. We're going to have special guests like we do on this episode, and we'll get into breaking down each player's season, breaking down Jamal Mosley and his performance this year, but also plenty of pre-draft content as we get closer to the draft. So make sure that you're following us on social media, you're subscribed to us on your podcast feed, on YouTube, all of that kind of stuff, Luke. But exit interviews this week here, Monday, were the exit interviews for the Magic. I got to sit down yesterday and watch all of them in their entirety. I think it's 19 total exit interviews between the 17 players on the Magic roster, head coach Jamal Mosley, president of basketball operations Jeff Weltman. Took me, 3-4 hours to get through all of it, Luke. But yeah, what is your overall take on exit interviews? Do you find them interesting? Are they boring to you? Is it just a bunch of stuff that you really already know? How do you feel about exit interviews?
It definitely is a formality, but I think it has all to do with the scenario, like what type of season you had. I will tell you this. Last season, I didn't care about exit interviews. You and I maybe did an episode about with the exit interview stuff with that as content, but I didn't really care about the exit interviews. It's all about, just getting better, improving, yada, yada, yada. This year, to conclude this season, we got a little more. We got a little more. There was more meat to it. I actually heard things and I was like, oh, I like that he said that. Or I like that they're thinking that way, and so I think that this year I cared. I went through and I watched a majority. I know you sat down, you went through all of them, had to make sure that there was nothing crazy being said by Kevon Harris,
I'm
Sco,
built
whatever it
different,
might
bro.
be.
I do this.
You are built different. I did not go through every single one of them. I went through a majority though, and yes, it takes forever. So yeah, I got what I needed out of it from those exit interviews. I typed out some of my own, things that stood out to me from those. I'm excited to talk about it. I think there's some good stuff. It kind of reiterates a lot of really good things for us, and kind of reaffirms what we already think about this team moving forward.
I do like them. I find them interesting regardless of how the season goes, just because it's like that last drop of orange juice. Like if you're a big orange juice guy, it's like, oh, this last drop that I'm going to get for 6 months, I got to get my last bit of Magic content. It's the last time that we're going to hear from most of these guys. You'll hear a little bit from Jeff and, from Coach Mosley after the draft and leading up to Summer League. But for most of these guys, we're not going to hear anything from them other than social media until September. So I like to, just because, like you said, sometimes they drop little nuggets there, and let's kind of get into that. So I want to start with Jeff Weltman, because what he says at these things is really the most important, in my opinion. Just a couple of things that stood out to me that he said was addressing, like, how do we best prepare for the unknown. He talked about how the NBA landscape really changes on a daily basis. You have 30 teams. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. It could be tomorrow, and all of a sudden we hear X player is not going to re-sign, is going to enter into free agency, or this player is unhappy and is going to request a trade this offseason. Like, stuff like that could change every day. And specifically for the Magic, Luke, as we get closer to the NBA draft lottery, it's kind of hard to fully prepare. You don't know where you're picking yet. So there is a lot of unknown that you have to be prepared for at any time. I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I think that's how this front office truly operates. Is like, I don't know what it is, but we're going to come to the conclusion of what we want, and it's going to and we can do it quickly. We can adjust. And then once we decide what we want, we're not wavering. We're not taking any BS. We're not taking anything we don't want. And that's how these guys are going to operate. So come draft time, when there's picks, trades, things that can be made, and then free agency, as it's a sneaky, entertaining front office. We learned that last draft season. I know a lot of Magic fans are, maybe they're not too pleased with the Magic not being as aggressive in past free agencies. These guys are picking their spots. They know what they want and when they want it, and they're going to make the decision that's best for the team. And we just don't understand all the time, and that's fine. But yeah, I do agree that's pretty interesting there from him from that standpoint.
To your point about really not knowing what this team is going to do, one of the clips from the exit interviews that's kind of circulating around Magic circles is when Jeff Weltman was asked about needs, like, what does this team need? And the quote here is, clean basketball, consistency, maturity, shooting. Goes on to say, more of what we did this year, and then we have a lot of needs. We're not that good. And for some reason, and present company included, there was a lot of confusion around, like, okay, what is he actually saying? The thing that we have to remember about Jeff Weltman is he is never going to tip his hand. He's never going to give you an idea of what he's going to be doing. If he's saying, oh, we're going to prioritize shooting over everything else, Jeff will not give up any leverage. It doesn't matter if he's giving you 0.5% of the leverage that he has. He is not going to give you anything at all. And I do think, as frustrating as it can be to Magic fans and to us covering the team and trying to figure out and inform listeners of what we think this team is going to do, that really is the best way to operate. Yeah. But from what I took from that was, they're going to be looking for smart players, good decision makers who are, can shoot. Like, let's be honest, the entire league has been going in that direction for a long time, And if you don't have that, it's going to be impossible to compete at the highest level. So more of what we did this year, we already know what the framework is for what John and Jeff like. They like length. They like positional versatility. They like high IQ, good decision makers. And they're going to be looking for guys that shoot. Like, that's what I took from that little excerpt.
Yeah, and to further that point too, in terms of they're not going to tip their hand, but I don't really worry about it because I think, like I said, they've got a plan. And the one quote that leads me to believe that is he said, "We have an understanding of how we all get to the next step." And it's like, okay, talk to me, Jeff. I want, like, I love to hear that you're confident. And that's just Jeff. Like, that good old Jeff. That's him. He's confident, he's precise, and he's going to get it done. And it might take a little longer than you hope, but he's going to get it done. Another thing that he talked about as well is he said it's important that we become a destination for players. That was one of his quotes. And even though that is very obvious, it was still, like I said on the front end of the show, they reaffirmed things for me. He talked about the facility, the Advent Health Training Facility, and that being, a place that people talk about it around the league. He knows that it's a leverage thing. He's collecting all of his pieces so that he can finally, do what he wants to do with this team and with the construction of this roster. But he understands by that quote, they need to be attractive. You need to win games. You can't just develop forever. These guys started to learn how to win. Then he kind of put it all together in this interview. Talked about, obviously you talk about the shooting quote. I talk about, they know what they need to do to get to the next level, being attractive destination, all these sort of things. He did talk about we have to grow our maturity level. And who knows, that's a very broad sense of the top of the sentence. But to me, that could mean, what's the easiest way to grow maturity level, Jonathan? You get older players, you get veterans, bring those guys in, veteran shooters. That's all I want. And I think that you can easily increase that maturity level, as well as, as seasons go on, the current players you have are going to increase a maturity level as well. There's a lot of ways to take it, but as we do with most things, Jonathan, we're going to look into every little word and we're going to overanalyze. But I think that this was actually one of the more educational Jeff Weltman exit interviews or just press conferences availability in general.
The fact that he was asked about assets and whether or not they feel like this is the most equipped that they've been heading into an offseason since they've been here. Because if you remember, when they got here, the first several seasons were about evaluating what was currently on the roster and then making those decisions and kind of cleaning up the mess that was the cap situation. The Bismack Biyombo contract was a huge issue. I believe they ended up trading for Timofey Mozgov with that contract, and then ended up being able to get out of that due to like the career-ending injury clause or something like that. And then Evan Fournier, what was it, $17 million a year that Rob Hennigan gave him a fifth-year player option that obviously he was always going to opt into. Like, there were real issues here that they just had to let it breathe. Like, the house is on fire, and before they could clean up the rubble, you got to let the house burn down to the ground. It took some time for them to get into a position where they could really start putting their fingerprints and molding this team in the way that they wanted it. And he says he does think this is the quote unquote high water mark for us. But that doesn't mean that we want to burn through it. So although they do have this plethora of young talent and cap space and future picks coming up, that doesn't mean you go and you just spend that on whatever is available, this offseason and just kind of burn through that they're going to continue to be patient and conservative and make the best decisions for this team. He also met with Mike Bianchi on Open Mic on, I think that was Monday or Tuesday. I don't remember now, but listening back to that, he was talking about how most of the guys on this team are still 20, 21 years old. And I do think it's a bit of a balance, Luke, because especially with Paolo and Franz, you have to show them that the organization is competent and is capable of building a competitive team around them. And you have to go in the direction of building a contender. But at the same time, we know that those guys really aren't going to be in their prime for another 5, 6, 7 years. And really, that's when you're going to be looking at these guys as like, okay, unless you add like another star to this team, if you just continue to kind of organically grow this team, the team is going to have to grow into that. How frequently do you see a young team just kind of come out of nowhere and make a run to the finals and win the title? Pretty much never. It just doesn't really happen like that. Like, you have to take your lumps along the way. You have to get experience. And I do think we've been talking about this team being really good in 3 or 4 years. I think a lot of that is going to depend on this draft and this summer. If they're able to get a high lottery pick, or you're able to trade for like a star, obviously that's going to accelerate things quite a bit. But if you don't get that this offseason and you're just going to continue to evaluate and be like, all right, what are the best pieces to put around these guys? Maybe this takes a little bit longer than we might have thought. But if you're trying to build a team that's going to contend for hopefully multiple championships, I kind of err on the side of it's going to take as long as it's going to take. If you tell me we have like a 6-year stretch where we win 2 or 3 titles and you're competitive every year, you know what? If I've got to wait another year or 2 for that, I might be in the minority here, but I would be willing to do that. But this is also the thing that everything Jeff Weltman says, you want to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And listen, I think this Magic fan base, after being unsteady or just consistently sucking for so long, this front office has more time than fans think they have. Like, and what I mean by that is that fans think, man, we need to win championships. We need to get there fast. We need to get there now. But I promise you, after back-to-back seasons of 40 plus wins, these next couple years, and it being in whether it's the play-in or the postseason, fans are going to be just fine with that. You suck for so long, and fans are going to get a sense of stability that I don't even think fans know how long of a leash Jeff and John have from their own standpoint. Like how long the leash is from the fans' perspective. So I think they'll be, we'll step into that season and people will be like, oh man, this is really nice.
As long as you continue to progress, I think that'll be the case.
Of course. And that's what I'm saying too. Like, I think that is with the assumption that they are going to just continue to progress. But I think that just people are going to be just fine, more fine than they think, with being in the first round a couple years in a row, and maybe not making out of the first round 2 years in a row. But they'll just be happy to be there, and I'll be happy to be there. And then you continue to get better, and then you're reaching primes in 5-6 years for Paolo and Franz, and at that point you have put the pieces around them, whether that's through signing or guys that you draft that become suitable pieces. Maybe it's Caleb Houston in a few years, I don't know, or it's just draft picks that you pick up along the way. But regardless, that's kind of where I'm at after listening to the Jeff Weltman interview. I feel even more secure with them at the helm.
One of the bigger stories from the exit interviews was Jonathan Isaac. Obviously was asked about the injury, asked about his health, and he said, this is the first summer I've had to fully work. Goes on to say, hopefully in the next few weeks I'll be full go. And then was asked about if he's going to be able to play at the beginning of next season. Said everything looks a go to be ready for next season, and then closed with, I know there's so much more in me to be able to do. So that reassured a few things for me. We haven't heard, obviously, from Jonathan since the injury, but it assured me that he still wants to play basketball. He's still very interested in playing basketball, which, listen, if he wasn't, who could blame the kid after everything that he has been through? But when we did our WebMD research after this injury, kind of the best possible case for this type of injury that requires surgery is that they're back to full activity within 6 to 8 weeks. And that's exactly the timetable that Jonathan Isaac was talking about. 6 to 8 weeks from the injury, he's going to be back to being able to do everything, which is super encouraging. I still think you've got to be very cautious in just kind of counting on the fact that he will be able to stay healthy. I think you really have to be conservative in your approach there. But I am a little bit optimistic. I can't help but admit that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nice to hear that he's talking about having a full, that rehabbing. He studied rehabbing is what he said, and then talking about having a full off season to prepare. What else can you say about that? You're just relieved that he's going to be most likely playing basketball to start the season. We might be getting Jonathan Isaac in the preseason. That'd be nice. That'd be nice to add that alongside whatever we do this offseason. And you just continue to operate like we did this past season, which is like Jonathan Isaac is just the cherry on top. If you get the cherry, you get the cherry. If you don't, is what it is.
You still have a Sunday.
But I love a cherry. So
I'm not a big cherry guy, admittedly. But if it was Jonathan Isaac, that is never mind. Anyways, let's move on here. One of the players that I was impressed the most by during the exit interviews was Cole Anthony. He was asked a couple of things, like what contributed to the in-season turnaround, and he said their belief system in each other. And we talked a little bit about this with Uncle Jeff later in the episode. But this team's chemistry and the way that they talk about one another, you heard it almost from everybody. You heard it from Franz Wagner. You heard it from Cole Anthony. You heard it from Moritz Wagner. You heard it from Jalen Suggs. You heard it from Markelle. You heard it from Gary Harris. Just the closeness that they have, in the locker room and on this team. And what they always say is like, we have a group that is not normal at all. And Cole Anthony talking about like their belief system in each other, and because they do love each other so much and believe in one another, like they just kept the course, and they knew how close they were during the 9-game losing streak, during the 5-20 start. We kept hearing them reiterate like we're really close, we're not there yet, but we're really close. And you and I were sitting here like, what do you mean you're freaking close? You're 5-20, like team is terrible. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden the rest of the way you're a little bit better than 500. So that was like really awesome to hear. And then of course Cole was asked about the success that he had this season, his role coming in off the bench. He said, I found something that works for me to allow me to find a level of consistency, and then added it was just about accepting that role. He feels like a big part of that was also health. He said it was awesome to stay healthy and that he found a pretty good rhythm. And the last thing that I have here on Cole, in terms of like accepting that 6-man role long term, said, I'm going to do whatever I can to help this team. Then said, I think we have a really bright future here, and I think I can be a big part of that. So, Luke, just super impressive, like the maturity level from Cole Anthony after his third year in the league here. Obviously, the best season that he's had so far. You and I talked about early on, like, is Cole going to accept this 6-man role? Because early on, it was like, yeah, I feel like I'm a starter in this league, but this is my role right now. And I don't know if his belief that he's a starter in the league is changing, but at least as long as he's here in Orlando, if being in that role is what is best for the team and what a lot of us think is probably ultimately best for Cole, it's just awesome to see the way that he's really totally like fully embraced that, and also realizes that it contributed to his ability to perform well and stay consistent.
Yeah, and he did go on at one point there to say like, I want to be out there and I want to start. So there is that aspect, although I do genuinely think that he will, for the foreseeable future, do what it takes for this team to win. Now, that is not to say that I believe that after 2 more years of being off the bench that Cole Anthony is going to be happy with it. If he's shooting efficiently, averaging double digits in points, 5-6 rebounds a game, 4-5 assists a game, that is not to say that I think that he is going to be content. I don't think he's content. But I think that, like you said, as of now, he's helping the team win. We will see as the Magic continue to add pieces. I just think perspective changes. Cole did an incredible job the end of the year here and accepting that 6-man role. But we'll see. And I do think that he did show a lot of maturity in the exit interview. We will just see, how far that carries and what happens. But we've talked about it. I hope that he stays as long as he is fully bought into helping the team win how they need to. And I think, as well as I alluded to and said last episode, I think he thrives being the guy in the lineup. And I think he needs to be the guy with that bench unit, be the leader, and be the Markelle Fultz to that bench unit. So, and he talked about that too. He talked about the camaraderie and how Markel and him push each other, and Jalen Suggs as well. And so I think that there's a lot of good that's coming out of it, that the competition at that guard position, and I hope it continues to trend upward.
And Luke, as we're recording this, about 9:21, the Bulls have just tied it up in the fourth quarter. So we may have to walk back some of that smack we were talking earlier. But anyways, another thing that really stood out to me was Moritz Wagner. He basically was asked about the outside perception of the Magic and whether or not like that is changing. And he said he was talking to Duncan Robinson, and the fact that like teams do know like the Magic have an identity. He said it really shows up what we're doing. And then goes on to say, this year there wasn't really pressure, but now we've shown we can win a little bit, and it doesn't get easier. So the fact that teams do know like the Magic have a way to play, and there wasn't pressure going into this year because you were so bad last year and you're such a young team, but now that they've shown that they can do some winning, over the last 57 games, I believe there were one game over 500. I think it was 29 and 28, if my math is correct, which would be a miracle, by the way.
It is.
But like you've shown that you can win, you have to pick up right where you left off, like going into next season.
Yeah. Also, side note, if Mo Wagner said that he was having that conversation with Duncan Robinson 2 years ago, I'd be like, just tell Duncan we'd love to have him. We would love to have him. As a starter on the Heat, he did well. He shot well, but this last year has been something to forget for him. So, falling out of rotation, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I think that that's something that a lot of people talked about as far as their interviews go. With Franz talking about, hearing from guys who've been on other teams, what we have as a group is not normal at all. It just kept getting reiterated that this is not normal. This type of chemistry is not only a great thing, but it's unusual. And that all ties back into what, Jeff was talking about, where he said it's important to become a destination for players. That is how you become a destination. We talk about it with JT as well, just what that means, how that plays into everything, and being something that maybe veteran guys want to be a part of, that type of atmosphere. So, yeah, I mean, it is real, and it's just great to continue to hear that that's the case. You kind of have that thought process, Jonathan, of like too good to be true, and you're just waiting like at one point for them to stop talking about how good the chemistry is, but it just doesn't stop. And it's been incredible to see that they've been able to do that, especially leading into this season where everyone also is talking about the playoffs now. That's the goal for next year. Wendell talked about it, all that it's nice to know that those things are kind of coinciding. Great team chemistry is being able to build momentum, get wins, and continue that into next year.
Mo Wagner also was kind of asked about, returning to Orlando next season. He almost had a half second like realization of like, oh yeah, I'm actually not under contract, heading into next year. And he said, I really love this team. I love these guys. And then he said, either way, I'm super involved in how this organization will do. So obviously, if he's not here, if he's playing somewhere else, Franz is still here. So he's still going to be invested in, how the organization does, and obviously loves so many of the guys in the locker room. I want Mo back. Like whether or not Mo Wagner is going to be the second or third center next year, whatever, even if he doesn't play, he's been in the league, I think 5 years. So like that's kind of like you're not really a young guy anymore, but you're also not really considered a vet. I think as he grows into being a veteran the next couple of years here, like his mindset, I think is so, and the perspective that he's able to have and kind of see the big picture at all times, I think is so important for a young team. Like regardless if he's Franz's brother, like that is a massive bonus. And that if I was Jeff Weltman, would heavily go into my thinking on whether or not I'm going to bring this guy back. But just the way, like the level-headedness that Mo always has is so refreshing to me. And it's probably my favorite thing about him. Like chippiness aside, he brings a great edge to the floor. Just the level-headedness that, as we say, chippiness. I mean, he's usually not the guy that is seemingly getting out of hand. He's just making other guys kind of get pushed over that edge. And he's like, hey, what's going on here? We're just kind of hooping. Why are you getting so mad? But I just love Mo Wagner, and I do hope that he's back next year.
Yeah, I agree.
Jalen Suggs obviously was asked about the offseason and what's the biggest thing, for him going into the summer healthy here. He said he's just excited to be able to hoop. And then asked about what went into his improved shooting consistency, towards the end of the season. He said consistent work and noted that going from 21% last year to 32.7, which he tried to round up to 33, by the way, he said is big time. So obviously you and I have talked about this a ton. This offseason maybe really bigger than like anyone. This offseason, I don't think it's bigger for anyone than it is for Jalen Suggs, and him just kind of locking himself into a gym and coming back as at least a league average 3-point shooter next season.
Yeah, I think that, Jalen said what we've already talked about with him. I don't think there's much more to add. I hope he does continue to improve. That is an incredible 3-point jump. He's getting to the point where Jonathan, he's a game shooter.
Oh my goodness. Have we ever like unveiled that on the podcast? Do they even know what we're talking about?
Did I say it on the podcast? I can't remember.
No, it was at first absolutely definitely in texts where you were like, actually, no, you might have mentioned it on the podcast where like he might just be a practice shooter.
Yeah.
And then from that point forward, anytime Jalen hits a couple of threes, I'm in our group chat like game shooter, or no, I'll quote practice shooter to try to mock Luke. But I would agree at this point he might be a game shooter.
He might be, and like you said, you were mocking him at that point. I think it was a little premature, and you were joking, and it was in jest because he still had a terrible 3-point percentage at that point early in the season. But yeah, he stepped his game up. Listen, all of our listeners know I don't really need to say this again, but I'll say it again. I have done the full 180 when it came to Jalen Suggs.
You've had your come to Jalen moment.
My come to Jalen moment. Listen, guys, if you don't believe me, go check out my Twitter profile picture. It has been changed to when we had Jalen Suggs on the pod on draft night last year.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. And it's
awesome.
Me talking to Jalen on the podcast. I'm
conveniently cropped out of that photo, by the way.
It didn't look good. All right. I did it initially with all of us. And then I was like, it's too wide for the timeline. So I had to get it a little tighter. They know you're there. You're always there.
Right. Caleb Houston was asked about his offseason work, and he said his biggest focus is going to be shooting the ball, shooting movement threes, and then reading closeouts. So that's like really Caleb is just like, I'm just going to be a 3-and-D guy. And that's what we've talked about from day one with Caleb, where the results have been a little bit inconsistent. But for a young guy drafted in the second round who you thought like is going to come in and be like, you know what, I'm a second round pick, but I'm going to show these guys what I really can do. Caleb was like, no, I got signed to a 4-year, $8 million deal. And I'm for the next 12 years in this league, I'm going to be a 3-and-D wing. Like that is going to be my role in this league. I'm going to start embracing that and working on that from day one. And Caleb's words in his exit interview tell me just that. Caleb's like, I know who I am. I know what I'm going to be in this league. I'm going to work on shooting the ball, movement threes, and reading closeouts off the 3-point line. And he'll play in Summer League, by the way. That was another big takeaway. That was confirmed. Caleb is going to play in Summer League. Paolo, I would venture to guess, will not.
No point. Absolutely no point. Maybe a game. Let's just shoot that thing. Stroke that thing, Cuzzo. Just get out there. Don't just play at 20% and just I want him to just Dame range the whole game. I don't care. Do whatever you want. You're Paolo Banchero.
Some notes from Markelle Fultz was asked about his higher release point, and he said part of it was just effort.
Mm-hmm.
That it's about getting the reps of doing it in the game. And then he also said, best believe you'll be seeing that all next season.
Mm-hmm.
So he talked that he kind of had to like rewire his thinking in terms of like, all right, how can I get to the rim, draw fouls, make plays for other guys? He's like, like I need to start shooting this shot. He's like, I worked on it all off season. I worked on it a lot. I know I can make that shot. So, I mean, we saw it at multiple times, this season. Most notably, that last game against the Heat, like the pull-up 3 off the dribble without even thinking about it, nothing but net.
Mm-hmm.
And the release point, I don't want to say like it is back to Washington because like I don't even think it's like super close, but it is the best that we have seen it since the trouble started happening in Philadelphia. And that is super encouraging. And it's like, how much more can that improve? Like, how much closer can we get that release point to University of Washington or Philadelphia rookie year summer league Markelle Fultz?
Yeah. And there's a couple things from that, and the same thought from Markelle, right? Like, he stated he worked on his perimeter game last summer, which to us, the first, I don't know, half the season, whatever it might have been with him, that sounds crazy because it was like, no, you didn't. You're not even taking them. And then we're getting to the point where he's doing that. And he did talk about, his, I don't know why it kind of clicked for me in this way, but he talked about it as changing habit. And I think that, like, I don't know what it is, but when you talk about maybe changing play style, it just seems like, oh yeah, just change your play style. Like, flip the switch, do what you need to do, change your play style. Easy. But when he talked about it like habits, I just thought about like habits that I have in general that like I take, biting my fingernails. I ain't never shaking that habit.
That's the first one that came to mind.
I'm never shaking.
Like, yep.
I'm never shaking it. And like with Markelle, you think of this game as if he's trying to break a really hard habit, where he is now, since he didn't have that perimeter shot the last few years, he's been in the habit of getting to the rim, drawing contact, dishing it out to other guys, penetrating pitch, scoring from the post, whatever it might be, right? Getting the mid-range. But he now has been changing his habit. And a habit continues to break, and you get out of that, and he's doing that. He is getting to the point where he's able to do that. I hope that he has some runs over the offseason where that's all he focuses on, is not just getting to the rim and not just getting to that mid-range spot, using reps to shoot, as I know he will, from the perimeter like he did last season. But the difference is he's got game reps now. So those habits are being shaped and they're being formed into new ones that will continue to benefit this team. If he can continue to do that, be a willing three-point shooter, pull up, catch and shoot, any situation, Markelle can let it fly. That is a game changer. And quite frankly, I think it's a franchise changer if he is able to do that and put that together.
Markelle is another guy who had a huge increase in three-point percentage, basically like 8 points different, like 23 last year, 31%. Yeah. That's not nothing. Like, that is legitimate. Markelle, give us 4 more percentage points. Like, get to 35%. And I agree. That is a franchise changer, because then the fair questions around what is Markelle's long-term fit alongside Paolo, alongside Franz, it gets a lot easier to answer that question if Markelle is at all a reliable three-point shooter.
Yeah.
I think that would make a world of a difference. Mm-hmm. And then Markelle was asked if the Magic need to make the playoffs last year. Basically gave like a one-word answer to start. He said, absolutely. Super encouraging. We'll talk about Wendell Carter here. Wendell Carter was asked basically the same thing. Like, what is the standard for success next year for the Magic? And he said one word: playoffs. That's where the Magic need to be. Wendell, the L sound here, was asked about what is going to be a next step for the Magic. And he talked about accountability is another area where they can take a jump. He said, I think being able to hold each other accountable to a whole other level would be a next step for us. And he made the point to say, not that they don't take things seriously, but that is something that they can still improve on, that they can tighten things up a little bit. And then being asked about health, he said, that's really all I want for this team. I think we'll be straight. Like, not even talking about, do we need to tweak the roster? Like, do we need to add this? Do we need to get more of this? Do we need to improve this? He said, we just really need to be healthy. And you could say like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. Like, every team could say that. But when you look at the Magic, especially, as soon as they got healthy, they were a 500 basketball team. And as these guys continue to improve, and they will, 500 over the course of a season is 42 wins. If you improve on that a little bit, why can't they be a 45, 46, 47 win team next year? If everything goes right, we've talked about, hey, the Magic have an outside shot of winning 50 games next year if everything goes right. But super encouraging to hear that out of the Win Daddy.
Yeah. Always love to hear from the Win Daddy. Listen, man, I just cannot emphasize enough how refreshing it is that these guys are just talking about the postseason. That they're talking that we're getting to finally hear these guys say from really this is the off season, right? At this point, you're talking about the future. To hear these guys say from the jump, playoffs. That's the goal. Especially when
words we didn't hear at all these exit interviews, learning and development. I'm pretty sure those words were completely eliminated during these exit interviews.
Thank God. Because listen, man, to have Wendell and Markelle both just very intentional talking about the playoffs, so refreshing. Those are your emotional leaders on this team, in my opinion. Aside from your Cole Anthonys and stuff like that, there's a lot of emotional leaders on this team, and I think as well as just leaders in general. To hear them say that is great. It's awesome. It's all you could ever want as a fan who you've gone through the seasons we have.
And I'm pretty sure that like everybody was talking about the playoffs in terms of next season. Like whether it was like we need to make the playoffs or like as we work towards making the playoffs, like that, like the thinking around this team you can see is shifting in a real way. And it's encouraging not only from like, okay, now we have the talent to really take this seriously, but like let's be honest, let's call it what it is. We've had to question the motives and the goals of this organization the last few years. And I don't like next year, that should not be the case. Like we should be able to just call it what it is next year. If we're not good enough, it's because the team's not good enough. Like it shouldn't be, oh, they're tanking, they're doing this, they're doing that. Like, no, like that should be gone after this season. And then I saved really the best for last, obviously, Paolo Banchero. Really, the thing that stood out the most to me from Paolo was he was asked about his expectations for the rookie season and kind of how he feels about that. And he says he met them. He said, I wouldn't say that I exceeded them, but I met them. Like, this is where I thought I was going to be. And as good as he has been, it's kind of crazy for a 20-year-old to say that. Like, yeah, I thought I was going to be rookie of the year, and I thought I was going to have one of the best rookie seasons of like the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Absolute crazy level of confidence to be able to say that.
He's a stud, man. I'm so pumped to see what he's able to do, man. Long term, he's going to be a problem. And he's got the confidence. He just needs to work on a few things here and there. Maybe get that free throw percentage up. And obviously, give me all the 3-point shooting you can give me. But and maybe one of the bigger things is like not to be just searching for calls. And you work on a couple of those things this summer and take it from there, man. He's going to be a problem.
When Jamal Mosley was asked about Paolo and like what he can improve on this summer, he said he told Paolo like just right now focus on like one or two things. Like don't get in the gym and be like, oh, I have to improve on everything. Even though you do, like find the most important things to improve on and do that. For me, it is going to be free throw shooting and jump shooting for Paolo. If he comes back and is able to up those numbers 5% each, that'll be a massive win for the Magic. You can add another 5 or 6 points per game onto his scoring total for next year if he's able to be a little bit more efficient in those areas.
No doubt.
So I mean, Paolo just needs to continue on the Paolo trajectory, and everything is going to be just fine. All right, that's enough about the exit interviews. In a moment here, we're going to get into our interview with Uncle Jeff Turner. But before we do that, want to give a special shout out to our patrons. If you haven't heard of our Patreon community yet, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show, where for as little as $2 a month, you can help financially support the show. We shout out our brand new patrons whenever we have them. In this episode, we do have a new patron. Shout out to Art Elswig, who joined our all-star patron level at the annual level. So just went ahead and paid for the entire year. Art, welcome to the Patreon community. Really, really appreciate that. Hope we'll see you in the Discord. As an all-star patron, you do have access to our Discord community. And then we shout out our Hall of Fame and our Elite tier patrons on every episode, each and every one of them. Let's start with Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Normal, Magic Player History, Julio, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, The Distract, Donkey Punch Dave, It's Not OKK to Say Okiki, Pierre A, Migzors, Nostalgia and M&M's, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Eduardo Sanchez, Drum, Danimal, Dutto15, Bobby Skinner, Goody93, Teddy Sylvia, Eric Lopez, Fuchsia, Juan Geraldo, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Destined for Greatness, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time Mr. TV, Joe Rothfuss, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95 Shred, Junior Barus, Half Freakin', Sean 177, Bulby the Dawn, Himlo, Ban Himro, RM Prof 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Hit 714, Let's Spank Don't Tank, Soft Taco, Jesse, Johnny B, Fuego Nando, Phantom 72, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Bull, his first name is his last name, and Only Franz. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and Elite Tier patrons and all of our patrons. Find us at patreon.com/The Six Man Show. Let's get into the interview with Uncle Jeff Turner. And now we are joined by a very special guest, Jeff Turner. We caught up with Jeff the first quarter of the season after the second quarter or the first half of the season. We figured we would give him a little bit of a break from us during the All-Star break, but he's back to join us to recap the season. Mr. Turner, how are you?
I'm doing good. I haven't completely gone out of my Magic broadcast mode. You know, you waited a little bit longer, I'd have been done for you. So you're catching me at the right time here. I'm still very excited about what we accomplished this season.
Definitely, Jeff. I want to ask you, because the Magic just had their exit interviews a couple of days ago. For broadcasters, do you all go through any type of exit interview with like the production team? Like, hey, Jeff, this is what we want you to work on this season. Like, is it anything like that for broadcasters?
No, you know what? We'll usually we'll debrief a little bit. We might do a Zoom call like this just to kind of debrief. And then it's funny, throughout the summer and everything, we'll come up with different things. Hey, I was thinking about this. That's really, you know, kind of through that's how Is This Anything was kind of created. Just, you know, David up at his cabin in North Carolina with nothing to do, thought, you know, I'm talking with his kids and, you know, just kind of came up with that idea. So we'll come up with some other things. We'll tweak some things, obviously, but, you know, we kind of got a nice little thing going here, you know, so it's, we don't do too much. There's not a whole lot of criticism or anything like that. It's funny because I don't know, not to get off on a tangent, but how many other teams do that? We meet, pretty regularly during this season, even on game days. On game days, we'll meet every morning to kind of hash out what we're going to do for the show that night. And Ty Eastham, our producer, gives David and I and Dante as well a lot of say in what we do on air, the different elements and everything. We have a lot of input on that. So that makes it fun. You kind of own it that way, rather than, you know, I know a lot of producers will just say, hey, here's what we're doing. You know, and they may do it right before the game. You know, you guys have been to games, been in the media room and seen, you know, production teams meeting, opposing production teams. So we've got a really nice thing, and we're in constant contact all season long.
You obviously, Jeff, you know, you talk about you guys game plan that morning. We know that you guys have a lot of great banter throughout these games, and you keep us entertained. And one of the things that you guys do is specifically this season is talking about the location of where you and David are in these arenas. So right. My question for you is, sometimes they tuck you guys away where nobody can really see you. Is there a specific arena that does their best to make sure the away broadcast team gets put all the way into the janitor's closet?
You know, the last game of the season in Miami, it's really, right now, it's probably one of the worst. I mean, even the camera angle when you see us, you know, the cameras from down below, and we look like Where's Waldo looking over the top of our monitors. That one, you know, Washington and Philly, you're kind of stuck up in a corner as opposed to being mid-court. It's funny. Even some of the floor locations now are getting tougher because they're really squeezing a lot of fans. Those are valuable seats. I get it from a revenue standpoint, but there are places where we are on the floor. We're down next to the magic bench, but there are actually people sitting next to us that they're actually out closer to the floor than we are. So if they stand up or anything, we're completely blocked out. So, we got a lot of practice during the pandemic doing games off of monitors. And sometimes I find us, calling off the monitor more than actually being able to see the game. So there are some tough ones. Golden State is, that brand new building. They've got this great little, you're like in a football broadcast booth. Like you've got your own little booth, but you're so far away from the floor. It just makes it hard. You feel kind of disconnected. I'm all about being on the floor. For me, I think it's better because, then I can hear the officials talk. I can ask them questions. I can see the players up close. I can, see their facial expressions if they're frustrated and things like that. I think, the NBA knows how all the broadcasters feel about being up off of the floor. So I'm not breaking any news here, but I really think that they've done the broadcasts an injustice by moving us. There are some great broadcasters in the league, and they do, and everybody does what they, is the best that they can do in those situations. But, it's just a whole different dynamic when you're up off the floor and you're away from the action.
Well, I would, at least in my opinion, I don't think your broadcast suffers at all. Like if that's the case, that you feel like, you can't do your job to the best of your abilities. I can't speak for Luke and Kevin here, but I don't notice that. I don't feel like, it degrades the broadcast at all. If you all don't have that great of a vantage point, I think that just speaks to how great you both are at your job. I have another arena related question. I'm a big food guy. Luke's a big food guy. I know when you guys are on the road, you're big food guys. Do you ever, take a little nibble, during one of these games? Like what arena, in your opinion, has the best concession food?
Well, it's interesting because one of the things, the fallout from, the way things have changed over the last few years, during I guess the year after the pandemic, a lot of the teams don't provide a in-arena media meal anymore. So there's no place to go. So they give you a voucher to go up on the concourse somewhere, which is, which you would think is a really good thing. But the problem is, when you've got to do all your pre-programming stuff and, like I've got to be a 7:00 game. I've got to be down on the floor by 6:30 to do my pregame hit with Dante and, the studio. At 6:00, the doors are already open to the arena. So here we are, David and I are with our little vouchers going up, and we're battling for concessions.
You don't even know which ones are the good ones.
I have no idea. We try to find something that's really close. But yeah, we've had some good ones. Toronto actually is pretty good. Toronto has what is that? It's a prime rib sandwich that's quite tasty. That is very near the broadcast location.
Do a little horseradish with that or no?
A little horseradish,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right, now
absolutely.
we're talking.
There you go. If they've got a Chick-fil-A, that's an easy one, right? You can just grab and go with that. The big thing is then, where do you eat your food, right? Like, so you grab and go. Exactly right. The problem with going back to your broadcast location is that you've got all your stuff out there. You don't want to spill anything or get crumbs everywhere. And then the other part of that, we learned this the hard way, was one night we were sitting, I think we were in Milwaukee, actually. They're one of the teams, and we're sitting there at the table and we're eating our chicken fingers or whatever was easy and French fries. And one of David's kids texted him and said, Dad, I'm sitting here watching you guys. It was a satellite feed. And and the camera was just on us. You're always on camera, The camera was just on us on a satellite feed, and there David and I were. We were just feeding our face,
slamming it. Yeah,
exactly. So you can't go back to the table because somebody's got a camera on you somewhere. So small problem, I know, but that Toronto prime rib sandwich that would have to be the top of the media voucher list for me.
I will say the Magic still feed all the media members. So shout out to the Magic for that. And let's bring the conversation back to the Magic now, Jeff.
This is so much fun, though.
It is.
We could do this all day.
We could do this all day, but we will get comments in our YouTube like, hey, the Magic talk starts around this time, and we'll get time stamped. Sometimes we just try to have some fun, and people hate fun, I guess.
I understand.
But to a season that, for the most part, was very fun. Again, the 5-20 start, you end up the rest of the way basically 500 basketball. Jeff, what has you the most excited about this team as we move into the off season and then into next season?
Oh boy, I think, John, a couple of things. I think, number one, I felt like we got a good long stretch, about 60 games, I guess. Not quite that many, I guess, 55 games. After that start, that we were whole pretty much, right? Other than the couple of suspensions and some things, we were pretty whole. And when you saw that and the potential of what this team could be, that kind of gets you a little bit excited. I mean, you go, we were using that December 7th, which was after the 5-20 start all season. And you look at what the team was able to do, having, a little bit, I guess, a game over 500 in that stretch. That's pretty good for a young team to be able to put that together. I really, one of the other things I really like, I love the chemistry of this team. To be so young, they're NBA players. They're going to have egos and everything, but for the most part, they put everything aside for each other. I think that's been a positive. And I guess the thing that excites me probably the most is the outlook for the future. I going down the stretch, and playing meaningful games to the last week of the season, I think that was huge for this team. And so my biggest thing I'm excited for is what are the first month and a half of the season? This past season, we were 5-20. What's it going to look like when we come back? I think the guys will bring that competitive spirit. I know, the defense, Jamal Mosley has been kind of a defense first guy. And I thought that carried over between the 2 years, at least once we got healthy. I think it got better. But man, we went from a team 2 years ago that averaged 103 points a game to a team that averaged, 111. Now everybody's scoring was up, but there was almost an 8-point increase there. The shooting was up, the numbers. And so I think those are all things you can build on. And then I'm kind of a numbers nerd. David makes fun of me because I really, not really a numbers nerd. I always tell people the key to the game is you got to outscore. You score more points than your opponent and you win. Sure. And so, that whole net rating, net plus minus, that thing really closed the gap, right? We went from, a -8 plus points to at the end of the season from a rating standpoint, we got it under 2, which is a nice number. That means, your offense is clicking better than your defense on most nights. So those are all good numbers. And I think point to reasons this franchise and the fan base should be very excited moving forward.
You mentioned the momentum that you think that they're going to continue with, the fierceness that they had, the end of the season here, the last really half of the season, more than half maybe, to definitely more than half to coming into next season. As far as that goes, you played, obviously, how this goes probably way more than we do. But would you rather have a start there where you're on fire the first 3/4 of the season and then you kind of collapse near the end? Or would you prefer a scenario like this for the perspective of going into the next season?
Yeah, that's fair. I think we certainly can't do what we did this year, right? Like, I mean, you dug yourself a hole. I think after the first time we talked at the quarter poll, I wasn't real sure we were even going to be close. When you dig that big a hole, I think as far as what the record is coming out, I do think I'd like, especially for this young team, I would like them to come out of the gate strong. Just to have some success, to build some momentum early, and then kind of ride that. But it's going to be important that they have to get better as the season goes on. There's no question about that. But I would like for them to be a 500 or better team, getting into middle December, as you're approaching the Christmas break and things like that. I think that'll be important to them.
Jeff, a little bit ago, you mentioned the team's chemistry, and we just had the exit interviews. A common thread throughout, the guys having their different interviews, if it was, Mo Wagner or, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, really whoever was asked, they all talked about how special the dynamic is in the locker room. And Mo Wagner, especially, he said, I try to tell these young guys, because he's played for different teams,
right,
saying that what they have is not normal. Like, this normally does not happen. And why do you think that is? What is it about this team in particular that makes it special?
I think it starts with their head coach. I think it starts with Jamal Mosley. He's just, I love his demeanor with the guys, his way of communicating with them, his honesty, his transparency. He's their biggest cheerleader. He never gives up on them. I mean, I made the comment in the Miami game, right? Like, the second half, it was pretty much, it was the end of the bench, right? It's Kevon and Admiral and Goga. It's just all the guys that they're the last players on the bench, and then the game meant nothing, right? He was up the entire. He didn't change. He was the same, right? He's up. He's standing. He's running up and down. He's coaching them. He's, he is, right now he's there. He provides their energy. And so I think that, and then his coaches follow along. If you talk with, any of the coaches on that bench, whether they're on the, front row or back row, they all talk about Jamal, that it's him, he brings them all together. He won't let them split internally. He won't let issues fester or anything like that. He just kind of jumps on things. I think when you have a leader that's so selfless and does those things, I think it kind of, goes down through the players, the coaching staff, and into the players. They're just it's just an amazing group that all root for one another. And Mo Wagner's right. It doesn't happen. Everybody's competitive. Everybody thinks that they should be on the floor. But this group, despite all that, manages to keep it together. And they're just as excited, for anybody else on the floor as they are themselves.
And that's something, just to as well, like Gary Harris harped on that too. He was talking about how with Mosley, his door's always open. Then they're an open book. And obviously that can go a very long way with the team. We also talk about the chemistry, not just like coach to player, but player to player, and how it does start with Jamal. But at the same time, these personalities have to go together. You can love your boss as much as you want, but you might not like that coworker. And if anybody doesn't like each other, they do a great job of hiding it. They're very professional at as young as they are. Do you know, Jeff, if they do if the Magic or if it's an NBA thing, do they do personality tests? Because I know I go into a job now and that's the first thing they do. Hey, what are you on the Enneagram? What have you taken this personality test? Let's see how you mesh with your coworkers. Do you think there's any type, and that's a genuine question, do you think that there's any type of personality testing that takes place with NBA teams in general?
Oh, look, I know for sure that's part of the NBA draft process, right?
Mm-hmm.
They go through a whole battery of tests. When they meet, that's all part of it. And then I think it's the work that you do when you bring a player in. I think Jeff Weltman in particular is very sensitive when he brings in, whether it's a draft pick or a free agent. He wants to have a good feel about how they're going to mix with everybody else. And so I think that's a big part of it. And their personalities, they're just, I think probably, and I could be wrong on that. This is just me, but when you have a young group, right, they're so young, and as Mo Wagner says, you haven't played for a lot of different teams, and you haven't been traded, and the whole part of that. It's almost collegial, right? It's like a college atmosphere. This is your only team, right, that you've been brought in for, and that's kind of the feeling I get with this crew sometimes. Well, they are kids. I mean, they're just a bunch of kids, and they really enjoy being around them, like a college team. And then I think some of the Gary Harrises or even a Mo Wagner, that have been around a little bit, I think they find it refreshing, and they just kind of jump right in with them. And they're very thankful to be a part of it. Gary Harris, I think, has had opportunities, to go elsewhere, but he kind of likes it here. He likes the vibe that they've got going.
How much do you attribute that, potentially to these kids, maybe they don't know any better, so they kind of buy into that more? Do you think that it would probably still be the case if it was more of a veteran team? How much do you think youth has to do with it?
I think it's a big part of it. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, the thing is when, a veteran teams, there's you kind of, there's a lot of looseness with this Magic team, right? And they make mistakes. And Jamal kind of lets them play through it a lot of times, right? There's correction. There's always correction, but it might not be in the moment, right? Whereas I think sometimes with a veteran team, the expectations probably are a little higher, both from the coaching staff, management, and from each other. There's maybe a little bit more accountability, which I think is something that, this Magic team needs to grow into, accountability with each other. And so I think, that kind of changes it at times. But that's not to say that veterans teams don't have fun. But I just think there's the expectations and things change a little bit more. So the Milwaukee, for that Milwaukee Bucks team, the oldest team in the league, every road trip, every game is a business trip, right? And that's kind of that's where the Magic need to get to with this young crew, and they will. I mean, it just takes time.
Yeah, and that's something that Jeff talked about as well, is that there's they need to work on a little bit of their maturity with this group, just in general, right? He probably meant more on the court stuff. I'm not entirely sure, but I think you can easily attribute to that, right? Jeff, I want to kind of shift gears again here when it comes to the Magic, looking ahead. When it comes to the off season, ways that this team needs to get better, and whether that is free agency, the draft, or the players just improving at certain things, what would you say is you've got one thing that you can tell this team that you have to do, and they'll get it done? What is the one thing you're telling this team they need to do before next season starts?
They have to improve the shooting. That's, you go through the years, and I made reference to this, many times during the broadcast is, we have guys that can, especially your 3-point shooting, right? You've got to be able to spread the floor. You've got to give Markel and Franz and Paolo room, right, to operate. And if you look at the year, Gary Harris was, finished, I think, 5th in the league, was a 40 plus, almost 43% from the 3-point range. And the next guy is Franz, right, at around 36. Everybody else is, in that 33 to, and lower. There'll be nights, Jalen Suggs will hit 4 or 5, right? But but he's still a 30%, 31% shooter. He got better, but he's got to get better. All of them have to get better, spend the time. We've got to get better there. And if you're going to add to this roster, that would be my thing. I just don't, the way the game is played now, it is just so hard to win games when, you have a, 4, 5, 6 3-point make deficit night in and night out. You're giving up, that many points. It's just tough. I mean, I really, the Magic improved on their production in the paint. Obviously got to the free throw line, the top 5 in that area, which they've been in the bottom for forever, in that category. Those are great ways to score. But, there were nights where this team played well enough to win, but, these teams that are shooting 35 to 43s, you come in, you make, 14 and the Magic make 9, that's hard to overcome. So, I think that would be, for me, would be the biggest thing.
Jeff, last question here, and we'll kind of leave you with this. You were a part of that 95 finals team, spent a lot of time around guys, Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway. What is your personal favorite Penny Hardaway story?
Oh, man, I love Penny. Let me give you so the first time I met Penny, and this is probably you guys have heard about this happen. So Penny, he came in for a visit, and then have you heard the story where he came in for a second visit before the draft? And that was back when we could actually, there were enough of us in town, we could actually go to the gym and play. So that's what he wanted to do. And so we all met at a little church downtown. They had a church gymnasium, and we went in there. We were trying to be, kind of secretive, I guess, if you will, kind of find this little out of nowhere place. And it was Dennis Scott Skiles was there. I think Nick Anderson, Greg Kite. There was just a bunch of us and some other people in town, some college players, and we played 5-on-5. So my story is, though, I was with Penny. And so, this was, I'd come up and I'd set a screen for a little pick and roll action. And, Penny would come off and I would do what Jeff Turner does. I pop to the corner, right? Side pick and roll. I'd pop to the corner. Penny threw it like I was going to roll to the basket and went out of bounds. Come down and do it again. And same thing happens, right? Same thing happens. And he's just looking at me like, what is wrong with you? And I'll never forget Dennis Scott, who was playing with us too. He looked at Penny and he said, Penny, JT does not roll. He pops. And Penny just looked at me and I was like, yeah, that's what I do. You don't want me to roll. And sure enough, he was like, oh, okay. And then so the next couple times down, he hit me with a perfect pass and, I'm in shot. But he was just like, he was just trying so hard to impress John Gabriel and the Magic Brass that he just thought I was sabotaging him or something. I mean, he was so mad at me until he figured it out. Another one I'll never forget. And this is now, remember, this is in 95 and everything. And so, or actually, well, early, I think probably 93, 94, I guess. Like we were getting ready for the playoffs when we made the run to the finals. And I remember like sitting beside him during a film session. And, Brian Hill was, talking and stopping the tape and pointing things out and everything. And he said something to Penny at one point, and I'm sitting by Penny and I'm thinking, ooh, that's not going to go over real well. I looked at Penny and he caught my stare and he looked at me and he said, I love this. He said, we never did this in college, and I was thinking to myself, you didn't watch film in college? Like they just roll the ball out at Memphis and play and say, well, maybe that's what they did. I don't know. And, but like, just like his wanting to learn, but that would just kind of, I just, inside of me, I just kind of laughed. And then later on, I was like, like, Penny, you really never, I couldn't get over that. He's like, no. He said, no, we just played. I was like, okay.
Awesome.
It's like, so at Vanderbilt, we watched film, but that was different, I guess. We couldn't just go out and play. We had to have a scouting report. Penny was great. It was like, and I tell you another really funny thing. So
keep going.
Oh no, so he will text or he will call me every now and then. But it's only because he has heard a certain song. So for whatever reason, back during that time when we were on a road trip and we would come back home, the first song we would run out to was Thin Lizzy's "The Boys Are Back in Town." Right? You guys heard us? So we would run out and they'd be playing "The Boys Are Back in Town," the whole deal. And Penny was like, he just thought that was, he didn't know the song. And so I was kind of just popping around. Yeah. And so I was singing it and he was like, so what's funny is he was like, what is it? And I said, we're back in town, Penny. We're the boys. We're back in town. That's why they play this song. He said, they don't play it every game. I said, only when we come back from a road trip. Of course, and everything. So now, like he's coaching, he's on a road trip and everything. He said, he'll text me and he said, the boys are back in town. I'm like, okay, there you go.
I love it. That's amazing. We'll have to make this a regular segment. Whenever we have you on, we'll have to have a few stories from back in the day, because that was awesome.
Story time from Uncle Jeff. Okay.
I like it. All right. So we will refer to you from now on as Uncle Jeff. Perfect. Well, Uncle Jeff, we appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully at some point you're able to fully unplug from Magic Mode and enjoy the off season. And we are looking forward to hearing from you and David come I guess it'll be October, the first couple of preseason rehearsals, I guess, right?
Yeah, I hope so. What's going to be interesting is do you guys think, are we, with Paolo, assuming he wins Rookie of the Year, we're going to have some national TV games maybe? Or, is it going to be David and JT doing all 82? I don't know. We'll see.
So I guess I do have one more question then. So how does that work? I know if we go far enough in the playoffs, you guys kind of fall off at some point, but how does that work during the regular season? Because if there's an ESPN game and you guys are on Bally Sports or Fox Sports, I'm still watching you guys. I'm not watching the national game. True.
I think that they're allowed, you get protected up to 20 games, right? So, if ESPN or I guess maybe TNT, just depends, takes the game, then they've got exclusive rights and you don't do the games, but they can't do more than, I think it's more than 20, I think is what the rule is. So,
yeah. Well, that's whack.
So, and then
Jeff and David all 82
all the
and
time.
then the other 16 games that we sweep in the playoffs and win the championship.
The way things are going, maybe then we can just live stream me and David doing something, or just do an alternative broadcast. How about that? That's the new buzzword.
I promise you, we would tune into that.
Like the Manning brothers, how they do on ESPN Monday night. You and David can do that. You don't have to have the feed necessarily. We're just all watching along with you. You guys are telling stories, Penny stories, Shaq stories, whatever you want to do.
It wouldn't be much different than our broadcast, probably normal broadcast. We'd just be sitting there complaining about where we're sitting or something like that. So,
well, that's perfect. Jeff Turner, Uncle Jeff, thank you so much for joining the show, and we'll see you next season.
All right, guys.
It was a lot of fun talking to Uncle Jeff Luke and those Penny Hardaway stories, man. I could sit there and listen to those all day.
Oh, he has so many, too. He's got so many stories, not just about Penny, everybody else. I know he's got, pickup stories, locker room, whatever it might be. I know there's a lot of stories in there, and we're going to get them out. You guys best believe we're going to get them out of him at some point, maybe before the season, whatever it is, when we have him on next.
Story time with Uncle Jeff. That will become a regular segment when we have Jeff Turner on the show. Always appreciate Jeff's time. And yeah, that's really one of the biggest bummers for me. And one of the things that I get most excited for about like the first game of the year is like that first broadcast. Like David and Jeff are back in my life for the next 6 months. Next year, hopefully that's 7-8 months, maybe 9 months. Who knows how long? But yeah, not hearing from those guys for quite some time is going to be a little bit of a bummer. But, we have their phone numbers. We could always, check up on them and see how they're doing. But yeah, big thanks to Uncle Jeff. Always a lot of fun. Luke, let's go ahead and wrap it up with this. Let's go ahead and run the Tankathon. Lately, we started doing the daily Tankathon on social media. Hasn't been going all that great so far. I think most of the time, we're at 3 days. I think twice we've been moved down to 7th, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that being said, when we post these, a lot of other people are sending them to me. Hey, I got the number 1 pick or whatever. So that is encouraging. Folks, it's only a 5% difference between last year and this year. Like, think if you're going somewhere, it's like, oh, there's a 95% chance, or like there's a 90% chance. You essentially feel like those are one and the same, right? You're going from a 14% chance to a 9% chance that you end up with the number 1 overall pick. It is not incredibly less likely this year that you end up with the number 1 overall pick again. It's essentially 1 in 10, a 1 in 10 chance. I can tell you, a bit of a gambling man myself, I've hit plenty of things that have like a 1 in 10 chance of hitting in my lifetime. So I have seen it. We saw it happen last year. I know it can happen. But if you've forgotten, just a quick reminder about the odds here. The Magic have a 37.2% chance of ending up in the top 4 and a 9% chance of ending up with the number 1 overall pick. I am looking. Looks like the Bulls may hang on to beat the Toronto Raptors. They're up by 3 with 17.9 seconds left. So it's going to come down to the Magic rooting for the Miami Heat to beat the Chicago Bulls to keep them out of the playoffs, Luke.
Is that how that would work, though? If they win?
Chicago was, 10? So now they have to play the loser of 7 and 8.
Okay, right. And the winner gets into the 8 spot, yes.
Exactly. So we're going to be rooting for the... We had to root for the Raptors tonight. We're going to have to root for the Heat
the
a few nights
stinking
from now.
Heat.
The dirty, stinking, freaking Heat.
Yeah. So we'll see.
We still don't know what's going to happen with these Bulls odds here. But let's go ahead.
I'm watching the end of this game here.
Oh, of course you are.
Kevin, can you mic in here and tell me if they called a foul on that 3 by the Raptors? On the floor. Ew. So they're going to the line for 2. Anyway, guys, you guys know how this one shakes out. We will find out here shortly. But yeah, might be rooting for the dirty, stinking Heat to beat the Bulls if we're doing that. So, we'll see.
So we're still waiting to know exactly where the Bulls are going to fall in terms of lottery odds. But let's go ahead and sim the lottery here. And the Magic move down yet again to 7. Charlotte jumps up into the top 4 here to the number 1 spot. Detroit falls to 2. Houston at 3. Washington jumps up into the top 4. Washington at 3. San Antonio falls 3 spots to 5. Portland falls to 6. and the Magic would keep the Bulls pick in this scenario. But the Magic keep moving down to 7. I don't really like that. But Luke, if we go back to last year, the Magic got screwed again in the tankathons that we ran. And then for the one that mattered, we made it happen. So hopefully that's the case, Luke.
All right. The score is in. The Bulls hang on. They beat the Raptors. So now, Jonathan, we turn our eyes to the last part of the play-in, where the Bulls are going to be playing the Heat. And we got to see who wins that game. The Heat, if they're able to beat the Bulls, the Bulls will stay in the lottery. Otherwise, that'll become pretty much locked in there. And then you just got to hope the Bulls lose in the first round.
Raptors are garbage. Hate their fans. Hate their team. They suck. Unfortunately, the Heat suck too, but fortunately, the Bulls suck too. This sucks. Whatever. All right. We ready to wrap this up? I'm mad now.
Yeah.
All right. Folks, don't forget the lottery party. Again, I'm going to keep bringing that up. May 16th, it is a Tuesday night. We are kind of honing in on the location here. Hopefully, in the next couple of episodes, we'll know the location. We'll be able to let you guys know where and when we are going to be. But don't forget, if you're listening to the podcast, in the podcast description, if you're watching on YouTube, in the YouTube description, you can find the link to RSVP for that. We're almost at 300 RSVPs, so it's going to be a great time. We're trying to get as many people as we can out to this thing. But that is going to do it for this episode. Again, a big thank you to Uncle Jeff Turner, for stopping by. And for Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You guys are listening to The Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!